All right, we're live and we're ready, brothers and sisters, to give you a dialogue between Reggie and Brother Ousman. Reggie was just going over some of the things that he wanted to discuss with Brother Ousman. And Reggie, if you would please open up um, and give us a little insight to what you want to discuss with Brother Ousman, and then Brother Ousman, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and uh, and let the dialogue begin.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, Africa. Good evening, Brother Ousman Touray, Minister Brown, our tech expert, the God King Dorel, and the whole African family. My name is Brother Reggie, and I am so excited to finally talk to the great son of Africa. I'm a son of Africa too, Ousman Touray. I want to discuss on this show of Transatlantic Productions some issues about Africans living in African territories, Africans from the U.S. and the diaspora living in African territories. Just a little bit about myself, Ousman, if you've never seen me speak or any of my videos. I got my training in Africana Studies from Dr. Leonard Jeffries at the City College of New York. He was the chair and professor for over 30 years. Got training from Dr. John Henry Clarke, the great elder John Henry Clarke, and Dr. Ben, and Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, all the great scholars there, Professor Edward Scobie. And I've been an activist for about 34 years. I've known Brother Minister Brown for about that time period. I have been to West Africa, Brother Touray. I've been to West Africa in 1986 and Egypt in 1987. I was the CEO of a travel company called the Transit. It was called TAP, and TAP was the African People's Project, and I was a chair of it was basically a historic travel organization, and I worked with Dr. Leonard Jeffries and Professor Smalls for 5 years, taking people to Ghana, Senegal, and Ivory Coast. Had a great experience there. And I have reviewed your talks, Brother Ousman, and I would like to continue the dialogue on, I think, on a little bit more sophisticated level than some of the other shows. All of the people who interviewed you have been great people, and I commend them for finding you and giving you an opportunity to talk to a different community, a little bit more specific on some things. Brother Ousman, I met the great Dr. Tangara. Have you met him? Of your country?
Yes. We have not personally met, like to exchange ideas or to personally meet and have a talk. But he is somebody that I know because of his position in the country and etc.
Yes. So,
Brother Ousman, I'm going to ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let me just finish. Background. Let me finish, Brother Brown, and I will ask him a few questions about himself. So I met the great ambassador. Former ambassador of the UN, and I guess now a minister, the Gambia president. And I met and was able to talk to him in his great talk at the United Nations. So I was there to witness this great son of Africa speak to the world about Gambia and Africa and humanism. And that was put together by Dr. Tyreen Wright, who I hope that one day you are able to converse with her. I went to the UN with Dr. Jeffries, Rosalind Leonard Jeffries. How can I say, in my undergraduate courses at City College, I majored in computer science, but my minor was Black Studies, and I received the honors in Black Studies, which was the coverted, how can I say, honors award that anybody in Black Studies under Dr. Leonard Jeffries was attempting to get, and I was chosen for both my community work and my work as a student. So I am pleased to talk to a fellow Pan-Africanist from a different era. And so like Clemson Brown, Minister Brown wants to know is, tell us a little bit about yourself, your education. And Brother Ousman, look, do you have a Cash App? Because, you know, we would like to promote you, and there's lots of people that would like to help you continue your work. And so if you have a Cash App or a PayPal or some way where people can donate to you, that would be great on our end, because I've seen you on all of these shows, and people like to have people come on, and the people don't benefit, and you have a family to feed. You certainly like to give a gift to your parents for birthing you, and you might have some younger brothers and sisters or some older ones that you would like to help them along. And so if you have a Cash App, can you please text it to Dorel or give it to us so we can put it up?
Yeah, sorry, I am not having any Cash App as of now, because I just started working on some of those things recently, and so far the website is not yet up. But we are trying to build a Patreon account and as well as a PayPal. But if people also feel like they want to donate, they can also do it through MoneyGram or through Western Union or any other means. If it is sent in the Gambia, I can cash it out, or also through Blacksit. That is the first lady that did the interview with me. She has a PayPal account, and through her, they can just reference my name, like Ousman Touray, and therefore I'll be able to receive those assistance. And recently, I opted to go for a university program in Rwanda, but basically before starting the master's program, I am going there for a mentorship training in one of the think tanks in Rwanda, and it is not free. Like, I have to put in money and for accommodation and everything. At the moment, there is a campaign going on, and we already have individuals that are helping me out in making sure that I am able to be in Rwanda later this month, and also to have my mentoring program, mounted, and then, to give me another opportunity to be able to choose from the institutions in Rwanda and which one will best represent my interests as a young Pan-African. So basically, coming back to Dr. Brown's question on who is Ousman Touray.
How do we do this? We Western Union or MoneyGram to Ousman Touray.
Yeah, Ousman Touray, and then you can send me the pin, because normally they give you a pin or a receipt, sort of. You can take a picture of it, or you send me the pin, then I'll be able to cash it out here in the Gambia.
Okay, so Ousman Touray. So we have your name at the Gambia.
Yes, the Gambia.
And then you require people to send you a pin. What's your email?
I can also, they can send it through my email or through my WhatsApp. I can also send you my WhatsApp numbers, so it may be easier for some.
Okay, let this be your last free show until you get all your stuff, because you're so valuable to us. So we need to support. That's one thing we need to support. This is not Netflix or Hulu or Lulu or any of those things. We have to support our African family directly. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
So okay. So tell us a little bit about your family, your culture, your training, your thinking, all that stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like Ousman Touray is a young Gambian. Ousman Touray is an ordinary Gambian. I was born and raised in the provincial Gambia, and in the society where I came from, they do not they do not embrace Western education initially, because we were the first batch of the school, and our village has been there for more than 100 years. So we came from a village in provincial Gambia, and then in 2003, school was given to the community, and then we were the first batch. So I started my schooling days, and I did my primary school in that particular school, and then I moved to another junior school, which is also in the same region. And when I finished my grade 9, it was when I decided to move to the Combos, which is in the city, so to do my high school. And in 2013, and also like some of the reason why I decided to move to the city was that it was difficult for us to access certain materials and certain books in the provincial Gambia, because we just have the school in there, but then the materials and support was not there for the local communities. So when I had the grades, and then I came to the Combos and did an exam as a trial, sort of, I was enrolled in one of the best schools in the Gambia, of course, which is Masru Senior Secondary School. And that's where I did my high school. And in 2016, I completed my grade 12 examination, and then moved to the University of the Gambia in the same year. So in the University of the Gambia, I started pursuing a degree in development studies. So I did development studies as a course, because I had been passionate about African development, and I have always been looking into where do we get it wrong as a continent, and understanding global development, understanding the way markets operate, understanding the way that we need to channel our economic progress into human development, and as well as environmental protection is very core for the development of a young individual like myself. So that is how I decided to pursue a degree in development studies. But then the spirit of Pan-Africanism, understanding that the African value, the African culture, the African tradition, these are things that were nurtured at the family level. Like, we came from families where, like, if you come to the Gambia, that is the culture, that is the civilization, where we say everything as a family, we support one another as a family, and that is what we build our societies to be. That if somebody is hungry today, you don't have to go to the streets to beg for food. You just have to enter in a house, and they will give you food to eat. So these are some of the real values that I don't need to go to school to learn. And coming back to Pan-Africanism in general, we came to understand that if we focused on the curriculum of most African countries, then therefore our purpose as a people, our civilization, our culture, we may not be able to realize it, because in some way or the other, our curriculums have been tampered and designed in a way that it doesn't fit our interests, and it doesn't fit our purpose as a people. So that is how I started reading beyond the curriculum. Of course, like, I will go and make research on the internet. I will use my phone on different occasions, trying to download books written by Pan-Africans, because I get to develop love about people like Marcus Garvey, people like Sylvester B. Dubois, and others. When I started reading about nationalist movement, both the proto and the post, and that is nationalist movement after the Second World War, after the First World War, before the First World War, and after the Second World War in general, and then understanding the way in which it folded. For instance, what were some of the demands in the pros? For instance, like people like Garvey, people like Sylvester, what were they demanding about? What were the agendas that they believed for the African continent? What was the thing, or what were the things that motivate them to take such a stand? And understanding this as a people, and knowing that that was the journey that they took. And up till now, we find it difficult to realize that as a people, that these individuals sacrifice their time, they sacrifice their life, they sacrifice their resources to see the betterment of the continent, to see the betterment of the African people, to make sure that we're united, and etc. And literatures that inform you as an individual on some of these things were automatically the issues that are behind the belief, the spirit, and my love for Pan-Africanism, and also believing that the model for African development have to be informed by Pan-African spirit.
Okay, so that's wonderful. So you've looked at the Pan-African conferences, started from the first one with Du Bois all down to the Manchester, to the later Pan-African conferences. You're aware of the Organization of African Unity, obviously, and the newer version, the AU, the African Union. And so you've read Garvey. Have you read Booker T. Washington?
No. I have read people like Garvey and people like John Henry Clarke, and bios of Sylvester, people like B. Du Bois, and the list goes on.
Okay.
And also Chancellor Williams, whom I got one of his literatures from Touray, who is in with us today, The Destruction of the Black Civilization. And it is a book that I really love because I have been interacting with it for the past few weeks, but it is an amazing book.
Okay. So this is to our audience. Okay, so Brother Touray, calling yourself a pan-Africanist, and studying pan-Africanism, you are brave. Living on the continent of Africa, you are certainly brave. Most pan-Africanists are hunted down and destroyed. So to call yourself a pan-Africanist is a title that you put on yourself. But I want to let our audience know, for a young African call himself a pan-Africanist is almost counting his days. As much as I would want to, how can I say, celebrate the term, I know there's great sacrifice and pain that comes to that. If you want to do it underground, if you want to do it above ground, you are certainly doing it above ground by calling yourself a Pan-Africanist. And reading some of these books, The Destruction of Black Civilization, Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, and some of the other books that we may not talk about, this young brother has a dream, and he's a very, very young man, of a unified Africa. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Can you talk to us a little bit about the history of your people?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think understanding the destruction that happened as a result of colonialism, as a result of, Arabs' penetration into the African continent, is not something that is a big thing for me to learn about coming from the Gambia. We must know that for far too long, the Gambia, before in fact the name the Gambia, has already been, visited by different individuals around the world. And in most cases, we are referenced the opening up to the Western societies by African countries started, in countries like the Gambia, because the Gambia is seen to be at the mouth and also known as the smiling coast of Africa. Thereby, and it permeates like most of the explorers that when they were sailing at the time, as they called themselves explorers, coming to a country like the Gambia was, the easiest way that they could access and travel to the interior part of Africa as a globe. So basically, the Gambia was placed under the control of the British. But before being placed under the control of the British, many Europeans have visited the Gambia, like the Portuguese, and then you have the British, there's French at some point. And the visit of these Westerns were never in the interest of the Gambian people. At first, they came with the idea of exploration, but they left as exploiters. And then we need to understand this as a people, because when they visited the Gambia, the people of the Gambia are known for their openness to strangers. We are known to be very, very welcoming. We are known to be people that do a lot of things just to see our strangers smile. So when they came in, we do not see them as threats. We accommodate them. We give them the space that they wanted. But before they settled down, they started enslaving our own people. And that is how the slavery, process started in the Gambia. Many Gambians were taken from the Gambia, from Senegal, and sent to the New World at the time. And then they were taken in countries like the United States, countries like UK, countries like France, as slaves to go and work in the plantations, or to go and work and feed the growing industries that were in the West. And this was prior to the Industrial Revolution, of course. But what happened is that they continue to exploit us economically by sending our resources away, sending our old gigantic men and women, some of them dying through the Atlantic Ocean, and the rest of them were taken to the New World, forced to work for their colonial masters. And at some point, the Berlin Conference came into play because in 1884, 1885, Western powers met in Berlin, and then they demarcate African continent as a cake, and the Gambia was not an exception. The Gambia was placed under the British, and they at first were in control of the crown colony of the Gambia, which is Batos, today known as Banjul, which is the state's capital. And it was also founded, it was founded in 1816. So basically, until 1888, Banjul was placed under the British, and then in 1888, the protectorate of the Gambia was declared under British protectorate as well. So that is how the British gained control of the whole of the country, that is the Gambia. And from 1888 to 1965, it is when Gambia gained self-rule and so-called independence, of course. And in 1970, we became a republic. But basically, you come to realize that in terms of development, the Gambia was one of the first countries being visited by Western powers, and then they were able to establish their own administration. But we were also very slow in our development, both in the constitutional matters and as well as in our economy and all sort of progress. So basically, the Gambia relation with the Western world, the Gambia relation with the UK, was not in the interest of the Gambia as a country, because we were exploited down the line. Colonialism was just unfair to the people of the Gambia. And even when slavery was abolished back in 1807 in the UK as a law, and it continued to happen until 1921 and etc. But all these issues were problems in the Gambia. But then even when we gain in independent, and I call it so-called independent, of course, because they saw to us that it was time for us to be liberated, and it was time for the Gambia to gain independent. And we must know that there also exists, that is the demarcation or the struggle towards independence in many African countries. And then that started when Africans started to agitate for independence, when they start to organize themselves into movements, into different nationalist movement, in making sure that they agitate for independence, starting with the Aborigines Right Protection Society in Zimbabwe for the Aborigines land. And today, as we speak, there is still a problem of land in Zimbabwe. And in the Gambia, for instance, we have individuals also that stood and fight with us, like Edward Francis Small, Pierre Sanjay, and others. All of them were in the country, and then they involved themselves in different struggle, trying to cripple the colonial powers, the colonial administration, in making sure that the Gambia can become a liberated country. So in 1965, we became independent politically and as well as economically, as it is put in the documents. And in 1970, the Gambia became a republic and has its president as Sadauda Kairaba Jawara. So in 1994, we had a military coup d'etat, and then we go back to the barracks, sort of. And then in 1996, we have our second republic until in 2016, when we had the current president, President Adama Barrow, and who is the one in power as we speak. So basically, that is a brief history about the Gambia, and a brief. I think when we interact more in the discussion, we get to see the real practical development models adopted by Gambia, policies adopted by Gambia, how our development have been folding, and where do we get it wrong as a country, where do we get it right, and yeah, we'll get to interact with all these issues. Thank you.
Okay, so that's a wonderful overview, and that's exactly what I wanted for this show, so that people can get a feel of the history of the people. And I'm gonna ask you some questions just to dive a little bit deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
A very unlooked period, and you did mention it to your credit, right? Is the the Arab invasion of Africa. And the Arab invasion of Africa was, and I'm talking Africa, I am talking African leaders, I am talking, Brother Ousman is not talking, he's just a guest on this show. So Africa, I am talking, not Brother Ousman. I'm not asking him to agree or disagree. Is that fair? That's because I got to protect my brother. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. So Dr. John Henry Clarke did an introduction to a book called The Arab Invasion of Africa. The book was by Butler. And in that book, after the Prophet Muhammad, to you Muslims, peace be upon him, the Umayyads began, how can I say, their imperialism into Africa on the guise of fighting the Byzantines, who were their enemy. So they invaded Egypt under those guys because Egypt is the light of the world, but was also home to Rome, that became the Byzantine Empire at that time period, and that the Arabs, the Umayyads, began, they came into Egypt the first time, they did not do well, they came back the second time, and then in the second time they tried to—
Can you give us the periods?
Dongola.
Yeah, can you just give us
So
the period?
the period is in the roughly in the 640s. So the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to respect the Muslims, the true Muslims, he passed away, and then you have a series of caliphs, Ali, Uthman, and you have a group of Muslims formed called the Umayyads. So the Umayyads, they find themselves into North Africa, and they go west, conquering what they call the Berbers, the Amazigis, and converting them. You know, Islam has these tenets. They give them a chance to convert or die. But largely, they bought their men, not their women. And so they basically murdered the men and used the women as concubines. And so you have this Arab-Berber relationship where the Berbers are becoming conquered and following Islam. Then you have the period of where the Umayyads enter Spain. And so they stay into Spain for roughly 500 years, and then they get kicked out. But one of the reasons why they get kicked out is because another sect of the Muslims, the Abbasids, war against the Umayyads. So Islam is not penetrated yet in Africa. African people are largely at this particular point in West Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, still traditional Africans. Not ready, as Brother Ousman said, with smiling faces, right? Willing to trade, willing to interact with these other groups of people. Earlier, before that, during how can I say, as the Byzantine kind of regroups, the Pope at the time, he divides the world into two areas, which is the West largely to the East largely to Portugal, and the West largely to Spain, and then he subdivides that. So now the the Christians are fighting the what they call at that time period the Saracens, right? So Ousman, you're following me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm following.
So they get kicked out. They get kicked out of Spain and Portugal. I mean, sorry, they get kicked out of Spain and Portugal, and then they find themselves largely now the Arabs in West Africa. So now there is a very, very important Arab that is the kind of heart to this conversation about Africa and Islam, and his name is Ibn Yasin. Have you heard of him? Ousman, have you heard of Ibn Yasin?
Yeah.
So Ibn Yasin, so now, I've skipped several periods.
Yeah, it's okay.
I skipped several periods because what happens now is in this particular period with Ibn Yasin, which is about 1046 AD, he starts to create what they call rabats. Do you know the Muslim term of a rabat? You know what a rabat is?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's part of this concept of jihad, right? So they create these military forts. And so it is said that he began creating his military forts in the mouth of the Senegal River, which would probably make it James Island, so-called James Island, and what's the other one? St. Andrews? What's the other island?
We have St. Andrew, and we have James Island, and as well as Gore in St. Louis in Dakar.
Okay, so Ibn Yasin, he creates a rabat, a monastery fort in those islands, and then he leads a jihad using Africans that have been converted into Islam as they was converting into Islam into Africa. And so then you have that period of about 1046 of this jihad, and in this period Morocco would be formed, right? Morocco would be formed. I think it was Abu Bakr II was one of his generals who was an African, and he began using his Africanness to convert Africans into Arabized Africans or Muslims, right? And I would say Arabized Africans because it wasn't Muslim. I'm sorry, it wasn't an African Islam yet. It was still led by these Berber clerics like Ibn Yasin and others who kind of dictated what Islam should mean to Africa and how Africans should practice Islam. So we get into another period where you have the so-called Great Mansa Musa. And Africans, I am going to be very respectful when I say this, right? Mansa Musa was great because of his wealth, but he practiced a form of radical Islam, and he took his wealth to do hajj, and so he took African wealth to the Arabs. And from the period that you have Mansa Musa, you have this period of this unquenching thirst of African wealth from the Arabs. So around 325, he takes his jihad. The jihad really begins. He does a pilgrimage to Mecca. He brings, he kind of quadruples the world's gold supply, if not more. He changed the whole value of gold, and that became this. So Arabs never left. So then you have this long list of Africans that who are in our cultures very important. but they formed these great empires, you know, the Mali, the Ghana, the Songhai empires, but these were heavily Islamic movements led by Africans. So Africans now are the leaders, and they are converting and warring with traditional people. So the Arabs now, you get into another period where you have Moulay Ismail and Al Mansour. Moulay Ismail, he creates a black army after he attacks Timbuktu and Gao, and he now controls the old African religious systems that was, how can I say, the African traditional religious systems was working in conjunction with Islam, and they had to create these great empires. Moulay Ismail now, he attacks Timbuktu, and then you have the later period where going into the how can I say, the period of where America was discovered in the 1490s, right? You have another Arab named Al Mansour, and Al Mansour now he in Morocco now enslaves Africans, and there is a larger trans-Saharan slave trade, moving Africans from the continent of Africa into places like Turkey and into Europe for the purposes of Islam. So when we, all of this that I am talking about softens Africa up, a peace-loving ethnic groups of Africans that occasionally warred with each other, was super exploited by the Arabs and by Africans using Islam, and so you have this huge trans-Saharan slave trade where Africans were involved with, never seen before in this particular world. And so then you have countries like Gambia, which is Gambia's what, like 95% Muslim. Ousman.
Oh, sorry.
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
So Gambia is 95% Muslim?
It is 90% Muslims.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the peoples before they were Islamized, before Islam took, before they were Muslims? The Sura people, the Sura religion, any of that?
Yes. Thank you so much for that brilliant question. Like the Gambia, just like any other African country, we have our traditional religion. We have our traditional belief system before the coming of Muslims, before the coming of Arabs, before the coming of Islam in the Gambia. So basically, people have been worshiping like traditional religion or traditional beliefs in which they have their own spiritual. They were more of like spiritual. It was like of a spirituality and a society that was built on a spiritual belief and interacting with nature to get to understand about the whole issue of God and then religion and etc. So basically they have been living in a society like that, and we have like different ethnic groups and different tribes, of course, in the Gambia that came in. But what happened is that most of the tribes that came into the Gambia came in when they were already like Islamized. Like most of the tribes that came in with their religious group, unless the tribes which are seen to be the first people to settle in the Senegambia region, which is the Jolas and another ethnic group called the Bainunkas. So this group of individuals have been settling here way before any other tribe in the Gambia, even though that today they count the minorities when it comes to tribes. But they had their own religion, they had their own system of belief, their own spirituality. We call it the traditional belief system. Until Islam was introduced it was introduced through trade and through jihad, as you call it. There has been like reforms and etc. And people that move from the northern part of Africa were the ones that introduced Islam in places like the Gambia and Senegambia in general, because most of the Arab nations and most of the Arabs that came in through northern part of Africa, and it was through trade and etc. And some of the tribes that migrate from Mali, from Ghana, from Songhai Empire, and came into the Gambia, came in with the religion of Islam, and then that is how it continued to spread in the Senegambia region. So basically, when they came in,
Brother Ousman, can you explain when you say the Arabs? How did you say they came in? They entered. I don't know why it left my mind, but can you better explain how the Arabs treated the traditional African people? Did they force them into Islam? Either you accept Islam or you get to sow it. Can you explain how that was done?
Yeah, I think I was coming to that point because there is no instances in the Gambian history where we have Arab people wage a war against the people of the Gambia. I have never come across that in the literatures. So what I'm trying to put across is that the Arabs that came into Africa interact with Africans in the northern part of Africa, and the Gambia as a country in the west had to interact with people from Mali, because most of the people that migrate from the empire of Mali came into the Gambia already being Islamized, and they introduced Islam in the Gambia. And most of them that came in, they came in unsettled against, the existing people that were within the African, because they were conquering. They were like conquering, and then they started to settle. And that is how you come to realize that most of the people that settled in the Gambia way before any other ethnic group are today part of the minorities in the Gambia. So we have the Mandinkas that came in, we have the Fulas that came in. They came in and settled in the Gambia and established their own empires. One was the Kabu Empire, which is under the Manding, and the other one was the Fuladu Empire, which is under the Fulas. And all this group of individuals migrated from empires like Mali, and the Fulas automatically came from northern part of Africa and are believed to have their roots in most Arab countries. So basically, when they came in initially, they just came in and settled. People open up to them. But what happened is that several wars were being waged in the Gambia as a result of occupation, as a result of conquest, as a result of dominance, because most of these ethnic groups has to fought war or wage war against the people in order for them to establish their own empires in the Gambia, in order for them to establish their own belief systems and administration. That is how Kabu Empire came into be. And then Fuladu, like when Fula start also to come in, they were already Islamized. They came in and they established their Islamic schools. They were teaching in the Gambia, like the Quran, the teaching of the Prophet, settling in almost every part of the country. But what happened is that when they settled at some point, they decided to wage a war against their host, and that is the Mandinkas within Kabu. So that is what resulted to the war between Fuladu and Kabu, and then Kabu Empire was, defeated by the Fulas, and then they established their own empire in the Gambia, referencing or ruling in the name of Islam, and that is how it came about. But most of the wars, most of the jihad
that you're talking about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
Most of the jihad.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that most of the individuals that waged war in the Gambia were influenced by the individuals that had waged war way before them. For instance, if you had read about the history of Niger and Nigeria in particular, you must have come across Ousman Dan Fodio, who was, the leader of the Sokoto Caliphate. And he was one of the individuals that have inspired or that has been, a role model to most of the individuals that wage war in the Senegambia region. So the Sokoto Caliphate, and then the coming together of the Qadiriya Brotherhood, the coming up of the Tijaniya Brotherhood, all these individuals, people from the Senegambia region went into those areas to learn about, the teaching of these particular leaders and the teaching of these particular preachers. And when they came in, some of them decided to wage war in order to make sure that the people were forced either to believe in Islamic religion, or they were asked to move in other parts of the country. So as a result of that, at some point, Islam became the most established religion in the Gambia, and as well as Christianity.
This is important. This conversation is very, very important as we begin to know ourselves again. The information that you are talking about is very, very helpful to our audiences. And from a young brother, it's definitely exceptional, right? A lot of Africans on the continent don't know this. A lot of Africans in Gambia don't know this or want to accept this, and certainly Africans in America, unless they take a Black Studies course, they don't know about about Mansa Musa, Askia. They don't know about devout Africans taking on Islam and combining, running a civilization with traditional people and Muslim people, seeing the positiveness of that, right, and also seeing the detrimental effects of it. Then most of the stuff that part of it is through your own understanding of who Gambians are, and the other part, is it from university training, or is it from reading books?
Yeah, as I tell you, we first need to understand that the curriculum in which we study in the Gambia was inherited from the colonial era, and it is not in the interest of the colonial masters to teach us part of this thing. So in most cases, if you focus on books just from school, you find it difficult to get to know all these issues. So the best option for any student is reading beyond the curriculum, as long as we find it difficult to change our learning style and the materials that we grab every day. So you come to realize that our education system was programmed in a way by the colonial masters that we had to focus on, on language development. We had to focus on learning about Western civilization and Western culture. We have to focus on learning about things that have nothing to do with African solution. And as a result of this, we still find it difficult, where most students in the Gambia and many other African countries find it difficult to understand some of these literatures. But I just want to say that going back to read about, Gambians, to read about Gambian literature, for instance, is going to enable every individual to get to know a lot about these ideas and etc. Because Gambians have written a lot about, the transatlantic slave trade. They have written a lot about the comment in the Gambia by the Arabs and the Arabs' invasion of Africa. They've written a lot of books where we can read and derive inspiration from. But the problem is, as most of the saying that if you want to hide anything from an African, put it in a book. Sometimes we find it lazy to read, and then that is not the way. We have to read in order to understand ourselves as a people. And we have to understand that you don't learn about the real African value and the real African history from the mainstream media, because that is not in their objective and that is not in their interest. So we just have to dig deeper every day and get to know more. And let me say this, because you made mention of Mansa Musa, and you made mention of his pilgrimage to Mecca and some of the gold that he was wasting along the way. We need to understand that up till now we celebrate him as one of the legends of Africa, but still we have a problem when it comes to the amount of gold, the amount of resources that was wasted in his pilgrimage to Mecca. But I just want to say this, that if we want to build the Africa we want, we still have a lot of things to learn from him. And that is, he was able to build an education system within Mali and build a structure in Mali and open up a market for Mali, and that is some of those things are what Africa needs today. Timbuktu at the time was seen as one of the oldest universities in the world, and many people had to travel to Mali in order to drive lessons, in order to equip themselves in knowledge. And another thing, when it comes to understanding trade within ourselves as a continent, we come to realize that when the demarcation occurred back in 1884, 1885, most of us today still look at these borders as if they are something that matters. To me, borders in the African continent don't matter. What matters is us as a people and us as a nation, and how do we open up for trade and investment. How do we make sure that a small country like the Gambia don't have to focus on Gambia alone to sell in product, but opening up, markets within Senegal, within Nigeria, so that the markets can be wider. We can produce more, we can have more production, and then to enable ourselves to trade within the continent and build up an infrastructural development that connects us as a people and connects us, as a continent. I don't like, taking reference from most of the Western world, but those are some of the things that we need to understand. That today, if Germany is to go dark, France can provide them electricity instantly. If let's say a country like Poland is to go dark, Spain or Germany can provide them electricity instantly. But if the Gambia is to go dark today, despite Senegal surrounded it on three sides, they cannot provide us with electricity. These are some of the realities that we need to understand as a people, that the colonial boundaries were made by individuals whose sole objective was dominance, exploitation, and then looting our resources as a people, making it difficult for us to understand ourselves. So the main focus, yes.
Well,
Okay.
I was agreeing with you.
Okay.
No, I have a question that I would like to ask Ousman, just for clarification. When you talk about Arabs ismatizing the Africans, and when you talk about traditional African who are Muslims who are ismatizing traditional Africans, is there a difference between Arab ismatizing Africans and Africans themselves, whose history is traditional African spiritual systems, but who are converted? What's the difference? I mean, from what I can see and understand, Arabs were very very controlling. They made war against Africans. They wanted to destroy their traditional systems, the same as Christianity, their names, their belief systems, and their own God and so forth. Can you deal with that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I just want to say this, that I am a man of faith. I am somebody who believes in God. I am somebody who believes in religion. I'm a Muslim, and that is very clear to everybody as a now. But what I'm trying to say here is that I have not come across Islam as a religion in its originality, teaching people about oppression, teaching people about dominance, and then teaching individuals to take control over other societies for political gain, for economic gain, and with the objective of destroying their civilization. That is not the Islam I understand. And if somebody preaches that kind of an Islam, let them go to hell. That is not what I learned. And Islam in the Gambia, Islam with the society in which I evolved from, is in the realities of my own society. Like in the Gambia, for instance, we do not have a problem of religion. The Gambia has never been seen going into destructive means or attacking one another as a result of faith or as a result of religion in our current settings. So what I'm trying to bring about here is that people that came into Africa with the objective of destroying our civilization are not friends to the African continent. And if an African was trained in that way, if an African was programmed in that way to turn against their own people, then therefore they do not represent the African interests and the African people. So I do not see them as a religious individual if their objective is to come and then defeat the civilization and defeat the purpose of the people, of the African people.
Well, I would
Myself
like to
as an
add,
African, mhm.
yeah, I would like to add. Okay, so we in the diaspora, um, we don't have necessarily the same views as to why Africa was imperialized, and so we understand completely for our purposes because we're sheltered. We are later converts of many of our people of Islam. You see Islam coming into the Americas in the really the 1920s and 1930s with Noble Drew Ali, and then the Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. So we don't have that view. We do study everything here, and so we study the Quran and we study the history. We know certainly the tenets of jihad. The tenets of jihad in itself are not necessarily bad because they have several sections, and the Prophet Muhammad, again, in respect to good Muslims, peace be upon him, right? They handled issues a little bit different, but you cannot. The Umayyads coming into Africa and the Abbasids coming into Africa, right? And the what Ali Moulay Ismail did and Al Mansour did, right? These were Berber Africans and direct Africans who pushed Islam through the sword, and so territories were taken. It wasn't peaceful. Empires were expanded, and the religion was the top religion became Islam, and the other traditional religions had to pay taxes and forced to pay taxes until it was easier for them to convert to reduce the taxes, right? So there were there is some realities of it, though you may not know it directly, Brother Ousman, right? Islam coming into Africa was largely by the sword. You can't separate what the Umayyads did to the North Africans, and then you can't separate what Al Mansour and Moulay Ismail before him did to Africa. That you can't now because Africans study in Islam, they take a less radical clerical view and look for the positiveness of it, the education, the arms for Allah, feeding the people, good trade relations, right? But in sometimes it is expansion of empires. Let's just get back to Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was able to accumulate the amount of gold that he got for his pilgrimage through transforming African servitude into a slavery of sorts. The Mansa Musa was a divine king, and Africa has many divine kings. And the divine king is very close to being a living God, and so now he becomes Muslim, and he wants to give a tribute to on his hajj. He stops at Cairo, drops off a lot of wealth, and then he goes to Mecca, drops off a lot of wealth, and then what happened after that was unstoppable. The quench of wealth from the Arabs, and they didn't see Africans as the same people. They see us as Abids, Abdullahs, Abs, right? They see us, and everybody, yes, is an Abdullah, a servant, right? But they see us as Bilals, right? They see us, they separated us from their type because we weren't direct descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, as some of the Sunnis claim to be. So I don't want to, I don't really want to go back and forth. The fact of the matter is that any book can be misused. So the Great Quran could be misused, and certainly the Bible was misused. Only reason why I'm talking about the Arab part is because lots of people don't understand that, though before with St. James and St. Andrews, right? These were Islamic forts, right? And these were key Islamic forts for the trans-Saharan slave trade. So am I incorrect about that?
Yes, yes. We had the transatlantic. We have the trans-Saharan trade before the transatlantic slave trade.
Right, and the trans-Saharan trade was Islamic ran.
Yes, it was basically a trade that happened between the people of south, north part of Africa, and as well as the Arab countries.
Correct, and so it was super exploitative to African people.
Yes, whether they all have their weaknesses because it was a barter trade. They were not using money, but they were trading in terms of resources. So Africans were gaining less than they were given. That is automatic.
Okay.
Something very clear.
So I want to be softened because for our audience, there's a certain amount of truth that has to come. We have not gotten to the Christian slave trade, but one of the key problems, and I'll say this, Brother Ousman, I will say this directly. Sekou Touray, he saw that there was a difficulty with Islam and pan-Africanism, and he, in his writings, he tried to fuse them, just like a Sufi Islam, a kind of a Sufi pan-Africanism. He tried to deal with the fact that who do Africans owe their allegiance to? Do they owe it to Mecca, right? Or do they owe it to the African? And so he attempted in his political thinking to try to fuse the relationships to make it for African, and maybe we can get a little bit into Pan-Africanist thinking in a little while, just depending on how much time that you have, because we're covering a lot of ground. But what I'm saying is, before it was James Fort and St. Andrew's Fort, they were Islamic forts, right? They were Islamic forts. These places were found many hundred years earlier through the Carthaginians. The Carthaginians were the first sea-bearing people to reach this part of Africa, where you are, the mouth of Africa, and discovered these islands, Gorée and St. Andrews and James Island. Now, so what I want to say is, well, first, okay, so Africa has, in one sense, like Dr. Wade Noble says, it has a shattered consciousness and a fractured reality. The fact of the matter is that in Pan-Africanist theory, there is a Pan-African theory, there is a problem with the African seeing his God out of Africa, right? The origins of his God story out of Africa is is problematic to Pan-Africanism. But Sekou Touray did a lot to try to mend those fences, and he used something else that we will talk about later. And maybe we could find some type of blend and some type of ideas or some comments around it. But for this audience, the problem is, Brother Ousman, you are a great son of Gambia. You are a great son of Gambia and a great son of Africa. And you invite us to Gambia. Is that true?
Yeah, you're all invited.
You're invited. Maybe 5,000 is invited. Maybe 10,000 at most is invited, but not 20,000, 30,000 Africans from here is invited, right? Why? Because that would change the dynamics. There would be cultural clashes. Some of us coming are Christian. Some of us coming are pan-Africanists. Some of us coming are exploiters and criminals, right? People to want to do the same thing as Europeans because we have a fractured consciousness and a shattered reality ourselves. And so one of your big claims is that, you want to change the perception of Africa to the world. Is that one of the things that you often say?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The real perception that people have of Africa is that Africa is a place of the world's wealth. And most of the people are trained to be capitalist. And so our perception in the United States and America is to come to Africa to enjoy ourselves as tourists, enjoy ourselves as, how can I say, business people, quote unquote business people. That is a personality of and then there are people who want to come to Africa, but it's a very small group of people who want to come to Africa for help. It is very small when it comes to the larger groups of people. So the majority of people who come to Africa come as tourists. Do you notice that, or do they come to?
Yeah, I know.
And so
I've also read tourism and development. So at least.
Yes. So we are conscious of that. And so one of the things is that's why we had educational tours to Africa, because I witnessed Dr. John Henrik Clarke cry. He cried in Ghana. He cried at both the African and he cried at the Africans that he was bringing. Why? Because the Africans, when we were there in 86, had no shoes. Africa was way less developed in 86. And the African American was giving dollar bills and $5 bills to the little children. And Dr. John Henrik Clarke says, do you know that I can get an African child murdered and killed? To have a whole $5 American dollar in 1986, and someone sees them, and this child is of a lesser caste, right? He could be, that money could be forcibly taken from him, right? Mm-hmm. And so there are these dynamics that we have to talk about. But one of the big dynamics is that for pan-Africanists, and pan-Africanist means the many people of Africa, the all of Africa, having groups of people where their God is in a foreign country creates problems that we don't understand. For example, Africans went to Libya. Gaddafi had a good relationship with Africans. Do you remember? Do you know?
Yeah.
He had a great relationship with Africans. And during the revolution, the Libyans turned on the Africans, didn't let them leave, and murdered thousands of Africans. Do you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And these Africans were seen on YouTube crying, praying. Africans on their way to Europe get often caught in this place in Libya. And there's all these rumors of the murders and the body parts and things like that. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about, but at the same time, they practice this peaceful religion. And the Africans here are very, we're super clear about, we hide behind our American passports, but we're super clear about what's happening in Tunisia, Libya, Morocco, and Mauritania. Gambia, no, we have not seen those problems. Even with Yahya Jammeh, that didn't really affect us, right? So we didn't see it as and for what Yahya Jammeh has been accused of in the context, and he might well have done great crimes, but it's nothing like the crimes of Libya, Tunisia, Morocco, Mauritania when it comes to African people, because nobody cares about that. Nobody, no Muslim, very few Muslims say anything about what's happening over there. I don't want to get you in trouble, but I want to be crystal clear about, I want to make sure, not you, but I want to make sure there are a lot of young people who say they want to be pan-Africanist, but not you, but there's a lot of people that make it like, what do you call it? Window dressing. They don't know the history. They don't know the complications, because these places, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, these are all part of the African continent, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they affect African people, and they are far more developed than many of the African countries, and they use Africa's wealth for themselves. So, what I'm trying to say to you is that we accept your invitation to the Gambia, like we accept, and it's warm and it's beautiful, but we do know 20 years ago, it was the Islamic Republic of Gambia. Is that true?
No, it wasn't.
Yahya Jammeh did not change it to the Islamic Republic of Gambia?
He made the declaration, but it was never in the constitution of the Gambia.
But he was the ruler. He was the president,
yeah,
right?
He was the ruler, and he made the decision, and he made the declaration. But I'm just saying that we were never addressed as officially the Islamic Republic of the Gambia.
Okay. But for us in the States, when we see something like that, right, it is chilling, right? Why? Because Senegal and Mali, they have a problem with the Touaregs, right? They have a problem of extremism, and the people of Mali live and die based on this war that really no one talks about. It's kind of settled itself. But what I'm just trying to say is, Ousman, are they not realities, or would we like to minimize them?
Okay, now let me come to this. Thank you so much for the context and the way in which you folded this argument. What I'm trying to say here is that I've read this this paper by Samuel Hunstein, in which he described as the class of civilization. And just to give a hint that he kind of predict that the world is going to have a problem, and that problem will be as a result of a class in our own civilization, as a result of religion, as a result of race, tribes, and etc., and even nationality. But basically, when it comes to understanding the concept of the differences that we have as a people today in the Gambia, and the difficulties and differences that many other countries also within the sub-region are undergoing, these are one of the very reasons that we find it difficult as a people to unite ourselves, because instead of using religion or our tribal differences as a model or something that will bring us together, now we use it as an instrument that separates us as a people. And what really matters is having Africa first. What really matters is us as a nation, us as a people, before any other thing can come into play. So when you look at the Gambia, for instance, the society in which I am doesn't have a problem of religious intolerance, for instance, because in the Gambia, us as Muslims, as Christians, and etc., we have everyday visitors who are not Muslims in our house. And that is the kind of a social relationship that exists in a country like the Gambia. And what we are expecting is we inviting everybody from the diaspora, as long as they're Africans, to come. We just want them to understand that this is the reality that we live as a people, and This is the kind of a social, belief system that we want to nurture within ourselves, and understanding that having to fight each other as a result of a religion that we believe differently, or having to fight each other as a result of a tribe and etc., doesn't pay off. Because if you look at it, like, the reason why pan-Africanism and all the struggles have been so difficult up till now is because we have not achieved the objective of the unification, and that is, how do we come together as a people first before any other thing. And that was the sole objective of people like Gave. They've been, sacrificing everything just to see that the African continent, first the people of Africa, come together as one, and then we can be able to fight all our other enemies together. And back in the formation of the African Union, or organization of the African Union, now the AU, these were the sole objectives. Now, when it comes to understanding this kind of differences in various African countries, and then the way in which some African countries treat other Africans, this is something that is uncalled, something that is unjust, and we cannot tolerate it as a people. That is why, as of now, I want to believe that we have to solve the problem of identification, that is understanding ourselves first, solve the issue of guns, and then learn to recognize each other as brothers and sisters. And that should be in every African country. There are countries in Africa who still don't see themselves as Africans, and that is a big question. We have to be a people before we can fight our common enemies. We cannot fight the enemies individually as a country. The Gambia is too small today to fight all the Western powers. The Gambia is too small today to fight all the Arab powers and etc. The Gambia is too small today to fight against the Chinese. So how do we make sure that we get in control of our own destiny as a people? That means we need to unite ourselves first. Our brothers and sisters dying in Libya is everywhere. We know that. We know from the Gambia that many Gambians have died in places like Libya, in places like Tunisia. And up till now, we have Gambians, and other Africans that have been, suffering through human trafficking in Haiti, in places like Lebanon, in places like Tunisia. And that is happening every day. We are seeing them on the stories. Not that we don't know. We know, but how do we fight it? That is the problem. Gambia cannot do it alone. Senegal cannot do it alone. But what is the objective, or what is the purpose of the African Union? Today, if all African leaders are able to come together, recognize the African continent as the first interest, recognize the African people as their first interest, then we will not have a problem of being disrespected in any other part of the world. That is what we need to fight first. Coming together, recognizing each other as brothers and sisters, recognizing each other as the people, recognizing each other as the nation. That is how we will be able to combat our common enemy. But the problem is within us, that I find it difficult to even recognize you as a brother from the diaspora. And the same problem is what I have recognized in my brother from Somalia. The same problem is what I have recognized in my brother from Sudan. So if we solve the problem of disconnection, building networks, teaching Africans the real value of the African, the real civilization of the African continent, then therefore we will be able to mold a generation that is going to come together, and then we will achieve the African interest that we want. And again, a similar network is what we want to see within the diaspora. There is a disconnection between Africans in the diaspora as well. And how do we make sure that people living in Europe and are of African descent, people living in the United States and are of African descent, come together, fight together as a people, build up networks that are going to support Africa as a continent. And when they are coming in, we just don't want to see them here as tourists. That is not the objective. We want people to come to Africa, invest with their resources, invest with their knowledge, invest with their skills, that will be able to transform the African society in a way that we want. Remember, the education system has always been our enemy, and how do we defeat it? Today, we have seen Africans, they've traveled all across the world. People like yourself have been living in the diaspora for far too long. And what if we have institutions in which you will be providing lectures on African history, on African civilization, meeting directly, being in contact with Africans within the African continent? At some point, we will defeat the problem of brainwashing. that they don't have to be relying on the mainstream media to learn about Africa from the continent, but instead we'll have to rely on African literatures. We'll have to rely on people like yourself, people like Dr. Brown, people like, the late Pan-Africans and etc. Rely on them, rely on their struggle, on their sacrifice and etc. to build the continent that we want.
I agree. And so the reason why we're having this show and Transatlantic Productions had me want to have this conversation with you, and so that we can discuss some of the ideas to make this a reality. One of the greatest thinkers Africa has produced was Sheikh Anta Diop. And I know you're familiar with him, huh?
Yeah, I know him. Sheikh Anta Diop of Senegal.
Yes. So he wrote a book called Black Africa, the Basis for Economic and Political Federation. And I'm going to read what he said. He says, our ideologists have not succeeded in moving revolutionary theory forward one step in Black Africa. Indeed, though one be armed with such a fecund, a scientific method of analysis as Marxist dialectics, assuming it has been sufficiently assimilated, it would be hopeless to try to apply it to a reality of which one is totally ignorant. For a long time, many of our compatriots have thought that they could get by without any deep knowledge of African society and Africa in all respects, its histories, languages, its ethnicities, its energy potential, raw materials, and the like. The conclusions reached have often been abysmally banal, when not plain and simply wrong. They have thought that they could make up for the lack of ideas, breadth, and revolutionary perspectives by the use of offensive, excessive, and murky vocabulary. They forgot that the truly revolutionary quality of language is its demonstrative clarity based on objective use of facts and their dialectical relationships, which result in irresistibly convincing the intelligent reader. I read that because I really commend you, Ousman, for your breadth of ideas and you willing to kind of engage in a conversation that deals with the African history, the great African history, and also the contradictions, to work with me in this conversation as we speak to Africa about solutions. So I would want to pose to you, many of our, and I don't want to get you in trouble. Remember, Africa, I am talking. Ousman is here to maybe correct me or to give me his particular perspective based on the realities in which he lives and certainly the danger he faces, right? But I will say that, Africa in itself has been in a situation, has put itself in a situation where they believe that they need to trade with the rest of the world, that they need to have a fiat currency backed by nothing, in French dollars, American dollars, British dollars, and now Chinese dollars and Russian dollars, right? As if these fiat currencies really mean anything. At the same time, since the fiat currencies aren't backed by anything, their fiat currency is really based on the continued exploitation of Africa, exploitation of Africa for its resources. So we're in a situation where Africa has the food supply, Africa has the mineral wealth, Africa has labor, Africa has the land, right? And those other currencies are based on these mathematical calculations as to what these values of Africa will be worth. Yeah. And these same countries need Africa for their military. So one of the things is that maybe Africa wants to open up its borders. Africa would be more successful if Africa closes its borders. I don't need, I don't want you to comment on that because you're over there. But
Yeah,
but
let me just say this. It is, I have come across the literature by Samir Amir, in his own words, the Lincoln, and telling us about how the Asian countries were able to delink themselves from the Western powers and any other civilization in the world in order to build what they are today, starting with China, for instance. So basically, like today, we have them, even as Asian countries, coming to Africa, looting our resources, coming to Africa, trading with us in a way that it is very, very unfair. And that is happening because we concentrate on the paper money and not our resources that we are sending away to the outside world. I think the new approach to the African development should be transformative in a way that we don't have to feed the world with raw materials, but we have to be productive enough to use our raw materials, which is a blessing that we sat on as a continent, and then start transforming that into things that will solve our societal problem. And then look at a new approach for trade with America and any other part of the world at large.
well, I agree, and so my forward solution was that Africa begins to close its borders, right, rather than open up its borders to the world, because all they're really getting is fiat currency. Like, for example, like Gambia. And look, I respect if the president of Gambia is listening and it's officials. I am not talking specifically to hold, right? I understand that you are into geopolitical situations far bigger than theoretical conversations, that you seeking to feed your people, seeking to develop, and seeking to educate. But let's first things first. First things first. That island that you call James Island,
Yes.
it should be renamed Reparations Island, right? It is the epicenter of the slave trade in the Senegambia region. Me, Ousman, I'm your cousin. My blood is Senegambia, my blood is Congo, and my blood is European, as well as other mixtures of Black Americans. I am your cousin. Since my blood is in Senegambia, like Alex Haley's blood is in Senegambia, up that river, right?
Yeah.
The president of Gambia, to your officials, you want to do something to partner with the Africans from America, you rename that island to Reparations Island, right? The place of Touray is just basically a trading field, right?
Yeah.
It's underdeveloped, right?
Yeah.
Africa, show us that you're willing on your part, and we will find ways in which to be willing on our part. One of the things that Blacks here can do for Africa is that don't look for Africa. I'm not talking specifically to Ousman, but he can comment at any time, right? Don't look for individual businesses from African Americans, right? Don't look for individuals, philanthropists from African America. Look to their cities. We have majority Black populated cities. We have Detroit. We have Chicago. We have Newark. Our Black cities can do business with your countries in a geopolitical way. To ask an entrepreneur to come there, entrepreneurs coming there for profit. To ask a tourist to come, a tourist is coming there for pleasure, right? To get what they want and then to leave. In both, and so we have experience with the Liberian project of Booker T. Washington, right? We have experience with during our European super exploitators sending us to Liberia, right, to be their eyes and ears, to be a separate population in Liberia, ultimately creating separation between Africans and Africans on the continent, Africans in America, that lasts to this day. The animosities. We need to do business. Africa, you need to do business with black cities, not tourists, not entrepreneurs, not people willing to set up businesses, not people willing to go ask you. You're asking us to go to a place, right? Mm-hmm. So when our money runs out, we're a detriment to ourselves and a detriment to you. When our money runs out, so we have to, like you were talking about, we have to look for new structural relationships, right? And both of us have studied Pan-Africanism, and so we've studied Kwame Nkrumah. We've studied the early Pan-Africanists, the Boyce, the Padmore, the Sylvester Williams, right? We've studied that, right? Sometimes we come up with murky vocabulary, things that we find that is useful, but really not useful on the ground of Africa. So I'm just trying to gather some of your ideas on Pan-Africanist theory, some of the things that you might, some of the things that's practical. Like I just gave you a practical thing. Rename Gambia. Rename those damn islands, right, to Liberating Islands, Reparations Island, Freedom Island, right? There is no reason that you continue to have the Europeans mark your territory when you have the power to change it. It is not James Island. We're talking King James. We're talking King James, the slave master. You are continuing a generation of super exploitation and failed scholarship when you continue to have these islands, things that you control, and you don't rename it. Rename it Reparations Island because Britain owes you reparations, the Arab owes you reparations, the French owe you reparations, and it all has to do with the mouth of that river and those islands where you've taken 20 million plus Africans out of the Senegambia region, right? Through those islands, connecting it to Gore Island, and then traveling to the Americas.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, brilliant argument. I think our officials will be watching, and I am so glad that they're hearing it from someone other than Ousman Touray. This has always been, the call, and we have nothing to, celebrate about naming our islands, naming our, things that belongs to our civilization, to people that have been oppressing us, people that have been, enslaving us. And like James Island, like many other streets, even in Banjul, you walk to the capital city of Banjul, our streets are named after colonial masters. It's something that, really, burdens me, and I am not happy about it. But then I am Ousman Touray alone. I think, so what we need to understand is that we have to start from myself, and how do we make sure that we produce many other group of individuals that will have the same line of thinking, that these names don't have to be present in our country. Only through then we can have a force that can remove it. But as of now, many people don't even think they matters, and name is something that is very, very important. And one of the things that we have been working on recently is about the automatic citizenship. Myself and the Blackseed family, they've given a proposal to the Constitutional Review Commission in the Gambia on how to reconsider, helping our brothers and sisters from the diaspora with the intention of reparation, with the intention of coming back to the continent to be given an automatic citizenship, but which is a process, and it is going to be a process of 2 years, 6 months. Like after 2 years, you have a 6 months process in which you may be able to be given a citizenship of the Gambia. but we are working on it at the ground now, and we hope to see that it becomes successful. And it also has its own mechanisms. There are ways through which we process it, and then just to see that we can also include our brothers and sisters in the Gambia and recognize them as brothers and sisters and not any other name. Because what normally happens is you come to the Gambia and then you are called a foreigner, you are called an alien, you are given an alien's card as if you are not African. So those are names that doesn't call. Those are names that are not actually good. So we want to replace that with a certificate of citizenship, whereby instead of being called an alien or being given an alien's card, they just give you a stamp which has a certificate of citizenship, and you may be able to process your citizenship after staying for 2 years in the Gambia. So, and it has its own mechanisms and etc. We just hope that a lot of reforms will happen. And I think Mr. Brown, I will have to take a leave.
Let me say this, Ousman, before you go. I realize your batteries are dying. I thank you immensely, more than you can imagine, for this dialogue and your work. I appreciate you. Just let me say this. In terms of pan-Africanism, we have to go back to understanding that out of the African mind came all of the knowledge of the human race, all the building of the pyramids, way before Arabs, any of these religions, Christianity, Islam, all of them, the traditional African thinking and their understanding and oneness with the universe is what brought about all that we have. And I was in Nigeria, and everywhere, Ghana, all over Africa, you see these signs with white images, and they believe that that's the only begotten Son of God. A whole lot of bullshit. And so when I asked people, I said, do you really believe that image of that white boy is the only begotten Son of God? And they said, yeah. I said, why? They said, because the Bible says so. It's in the Bible. I said, well, if you believe that's God's Son, do you think he's closer to God than you? And they would think, and then they say, yes, look at the way they live and the way we live. So the mind is enslaved. All of these religions have enslaved our mind. Now, look, they're there and they're going to be there. The only thing I'm saying is that we've got, as pan-Africanists, to understand that the foundation of all these religions came out of the African mind itself as well. We just have fragments of them, and we have to understand how to.
Wow. Sorry, like I have 30 seconds to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clemson, before he goes, I want to say that you are a great son of Africa, Ousman Touray. We are very, very proud of you, and I hope your country and your people are very proud of you. You are great thinkers like Kwame Nkrumah, Secretary, Julius Nyeri, the Diop, the boys. You are their son. Africa should be proud of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you, Brother Ousman.
So wait, Clemson, don't go yet.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I want to, for the people that's still listening, that the great Ousman Touray had to take a leave because of just his schedule. He's busy, and certainly because of power and a lot of other things. One of the things that I wanted to talk to the African people, the African world, is that none of what we are planning to do is possible without a pan-African university system. Nothing that we want to do throughout all of Africa can be done without a university system that's pan-African. One that allows Africans to get a PhD or doctorate degrees from an internal African system that is protected from the external hegemony of white supremacy. We need a Pan-African university system, right? So that we can solve the problems of Africa on the micro level, and we can solve the problems of Africa on the macro level, the micro and the macro level, right? And so that our theorists can come in and to solve these small and big problems, these internal problems, and then solve the external problems and forces. So we, in order for us to have a systems analysis, as my great Dr. Leonard Jeffries says, my mentor, you need a systems analysis. You need to understand the economics, politics, and culture, but you can only understand that if you study it on a university level, right? To the other groups of people, there are a lot of people who will be calling themselves pan-Africanists, like people call themselves Black Lives Matter. None of this comes without study. So this young brother, Ousman Touray, comes on this show, right, equipped with the history of his people, the history of other countries, and understands the relationships and the development of these ideas outside of his own country. If you're going to call yourself a Pan-Africanist, you must study Nkrumah. You must study Sekou Touré. You must study Julius Nyerere. And you must come up with solutions to African problems based on what they posed and based on the contradictions or the things that they didn't do so well for Africa. The other major thing is, like I said to Ousman Touray, you know, these places can't go forward. It can't be no James Island. It can't go forward when that is the center of our reparations movement in Africa and Gambia. More than 20 million people was taken from the Senegambia region, passed through those islands onto Gorée Island, passed through Gorée Island to the United States on the transatlantic slave trade. That island cannot be called, James Island. The other one can't be called St. James Island. Now, we many of us go to Touray, have been to Touray, because Alex Haley made it famous, but it was famous before Roots. It tells a story of the Arab and African slave trade. Touray has to be a Pan-African landmark. Senegal, to its credit, has done great things with the monument that they that created. Is a fantastic effort to bridge the gaps. We in Gambia, that has to be done. We are very conscious, if you're listening to the ministers, because Ousman Touray is not here. We're very concerned that you in your universities have Chinese studies. You might think that's a good thing. It may appear as a good thing, but there is no significant diasporan studies, Black studies, African studies in your universities. That is something that we here will put in front of your face and asks you to change. At the same time, President Barrow, we are proud of you. Dr. Tangara is a great servant of your people, right? We are proud. We have scholars like Dr. Tyree Wright and others who's been to Africa, Senegal many, many times, right? Who know Senegal, who are expert historians. Use them. Use our great scholars that are here. Dr. Leonard Jeffries, while he still has strength and energy. Use our great scholars here. We have a wealth of experience to aid you in your university process. Use those people. We are very we're observant. We are mindful of lip service. The citizenship, it sounds nice, you know, but that's really about African Americans being expats and living there and living out their retirement and stuff like that. That's not necessarily development. Development happens when you link up your Pan-African University with universities in our cities, our city colleges, where we could exchange peoples and ideas and resources and use technology to do it. It doesn't use technology, so we don't have to have the big ivory universities. We don't need that anymore. What we need is unity and a willpower that you Africans on the continent and your thinkers can work academically, intellectually with ours on our side in Britain, in the rest of in France, and in the Americas. So with technology, we don't have the problems that we had before. The tourism is I know tourism brings you wealth, right? But ideas and solutions give you a lifetime of wealth. It is the true wealth of unity through working together to solve each other's problems. So, Clemson, do you have any more comments, ideas, and things like that?
No, actually, I think this was an excellent program. I just hope people share it, and I hope they don't forget the Cash App for you, Reggie. And also,
as important or more important, we have to support people, these young brothers like Ousman, Touray, and sisters. One of the things I did want to talk about Africa is we're very, very mindful. We are very, very mindful that you haven't fixed this issue of being egalitarian. There are all of these beautiful, super smart African women who seem to have to take a back seat to men. Men and women are soldiers in this war. And you know, our great theorists, Nkrumah and Touray, talked about the issues of gender equality, and in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, I'm going to borrow something that they said in their platform. Egalitarianism is the basic unity of matter despite its varying manifestations, which give rise to egalitarianism. Man and woman is one, for all men and women have the same basis and arise from the same evolution according to materialism. This is the objective ground of egalitarianism. And that was written by Kwame Nkrumah himself. Use that humanism to treat each woman and man as an end in herself, and not merely as a matter, as a means to someone else's end. Kwame Nkrumah said that. Read the writings of our great theoretical thinkers and make it better if it doesn't directly fit. But we have to solve this issue of African men and African women, African men taking a higher seat based on things that's not even our culture, like for example, Islam. African women are full and equal partners in the struggle to build revolutionary pan-Africanism, which includes what Kwame Nkrumah said, scientific socialism. We acknowledge the historic oppression and arrested development of African women who have suffered immeasurably in Africa's history, inside and outside the movement for pan-Africanism, right? You could take or leave or modify scientific socialism, which we should, but the main part of that is that African women are full and equal partners in the struggle to rebuild Africa. Africa, you have to learn to use them. So those are my last major points. You think it was a pretty good show, Minister?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty good show. And you know, speaking about women, look, I'm like Dr. Ben. That's our God. We came from her, and she's everything. She's everything. I'm with you 100% when it comes to the support of our women. If it was another time, I would talk about the lion and the lioness, and so it would bring in the king and the queen and all of what makes us great as one, as a people. But you can't forget that it was ISIS who put the brother back together after he had been murdered by his evil brother, Seth, and his body cut into 14 pieces and scattered up and down the Nile. She, for 70 days, walked the Nile and found all of his pieces except one and put him back together. That is kind of where our sisters are today. They have lived through the shattered destruction of their men. They have seen it, they have experienced it, they have been there through the evil that we as men suffered, but they suffered also, and in many ways, even worse than we as men suffered. It's hard to see it, hard to believe it, but every mother cries undyingly for her son and her children who are past or who are destroyed. And that's the way the African mother in Africa felt when her children, her people, were taken away in slavery. They still cry, and they still long for the unity that will bring us back to our wholeness. We don't often think of the tears that were shed in Africa for the children that were brought and taken as slaves and brought here, taken, as their children are brought here to America and enslaved. But we have to understand that Africa cried then and is crying now for the unity and the homecoming of their children. They await our arrival. So, Reggie, thank you. Let's get busy and let's do
I don't want to leave out, I do not want to leave out another statement from the All African People's Revolutionary Party, GC, that is important. The African youth, especially African students, are the mainstay of the African Revolution as they bring energy, enthusiasm, and an unquenchable thirst for a future that provides them an opportunity to realize their dreams and aspirations. They know that capitalism, racism, Zionism, settler colonialism, and neocolonialism will never offer them anything except crumbs, if that. We thank Kwame Touray, formerly Stokely Carmichael, for putting these concepts together so that we have a blueprint. So thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, Africa. Thank you, the African American audience, and all Africans in diaspora.
Don't forget God King, who is
the God King Dorrell is our technical master. And so this was, I hope that this goes as viral as the other videos on Ousman Touray, because I think that this is much more substantial in education. So, peace.
Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.